also a story of migration. It's also a story about family. It's a story about labor and how intricately those things are connected for all of us. And this used to be Laura James's library, so we're so honored and pleased to welcome her home. And if you haven't already seen it, upstairs in the youth wing, there's an exhibition of the original paintings that form the pages of this book. And I have to say, always, seeing the painting in front of you in the flesh is very different from seeing it in reproduction. So I invite you, after this program, to go upstairs. You can either take the elevator or the stairs to the youth wing, it's right on the left-hand side, and see these really exquisite, brightly, vividly colored paintings that are just so rich in their storytelling power and their emotive power. They're really special. We will also, after this portion of the program, Laura will be signing books in this direct lobby over here, and she has also brought some of her exquisite prints for sale. So you can, if you haven't already, get a holiday gift for someone, support a really extraordinary artist.
I'm going to try to get through this without crying too much. I'm going to cry, but not too much. Okay, so yes, I am a self-taught painter, and I learned how to paint from books in this library. And not just paint, music and just all kinds of things. So it's so important to have this space and, just to be able to learn here. And, I'm just so happy to be here. Okay. So I'm really glad that Cora saw the importance of the topic, nannies and domestic workers, and invited me to come to have this exhibit here. And highlighting domestic workers and the work that they do was a goal of mine when I first began the series, Nannies and Other Mothers. These are paintings from that series. I'm going to show some paintings from the series as I go. I like to paint in series. I paint women mostly. And, this was a story that was my life, growing up with many people who were domestic workers and nannies. So it was something that I had firsthand knowledge of. So it was pretty easy for me to imagine these pictures. A couple of years ago, an editor from Groundwood Books, they reached out about illustrating someone else's book. And it was a good story, but I declined at the time. And then a few weeks later, the editor wrote back and said that she was looking at the Nannies and Other Mothers series on my website, and would I want to illustrate a book about a nanny, write an illustrated book? And I said, yes, I would, very much so. And so that's how this book came to be. So, as I say, these are some images from the original series, Stroll, and Property of a Gentleman. I like to collect 70s catalogs, different catalogs with antiques. So this was really fun to be able to paint this picture with all these different antiques that I like to look at. Also, you can see in both of these paintings, the child of the nanny is depicted. In the first one, you can see they're sort of under the manhole, and then this little image, because I would imagine that the mother is always thinking about the child, no matter what they're doing. So, and here are a couple of others, the party and the nanny. And this piece here, it's a more historic piece based in American slavery, which is another topic that I've painted. This is called Extended Family. And it's showing how the master had children with his enslaved woman, which is not a secret, right? Mm-hmm. And, but this is, there's shame here. This is shameful, right? It's supposed to be shameful. And, this type of legacy may elicit shame, but, who had a choice to do this? This was what they had to do. This is what was done. And, not, rearing children and taking care of children so that others, let's say, can go to work is just something that is necessary to have done, because babies can't take care of themselves, right? So it's something that needs to happen. And I don't think it should necessarily be something that's shameful. It isn't, as a matter of fact, you know, and it should and can be celebrated. And that's what we were hoping to do with this project my sister and I worked on, where we, okay, I'm gonna get back to my script. Okay, I exhibited the paintings many times. The series has about 12 to 15 paintings in it. I sold most of them, but I still wanted to show the work, so my sister Sonia and I developed a project where we worked with domestic workers from the group called Domestic Workers United here in New York, and we showed them the images and we transcribed their impressions of them, which we hung alongside the prints. And you know, what they said about the images and what we ultimately hung was really on point to what I was trying to portray. So I knew that I really did connect with the story, and I did a good job with, you know. So this exhibit was at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and they had a lot of groups of social work students come out, and we did a talk with them, and the women came out as well. And we were very happy to have them come and see. Yeah, we also presented this at Riverside Church in New York, and we had a panel discussion, which Sharon was a part of. And then in Miami and in Little Haiti, we did the same thing. So my parents were born in the Caribbean, in Antigua, which is a British colony. And after World War II, Britain needed workers, so they invited thousands of Caribbean nationals to emigrate to England. You know, and they were known as the Windrush generation. And the migration lasted until about 1971. And so my parents first went to England. Actually, my father is in that picture on the end in front of the hotel. He liked to dress up.
Yes.
So when my father was 13, he worked as a sharecropper in Antigua. And his mother had passed away when he was about 7. So, you know, people felt sorry for him, quote unquote. But when he was 18, he was able to buy a ticket he was able to purchase a ticket on this boat, not on this boat, but on a boat to go to England, which many of his contemporaries couldn't do. So, you know, he was proud of himself for that. I wanted to include this painting from the Nanny series. This is called For the Elder Sister, who stays at home when the rest of the family goes foreign. Mm-hmm. Because basically somebody has to take care of the old folks. Mm-hmm. And also, many times, the children of other women who emigrated. And my mother was the third of 8 children. And in the early 60s, she left Antigua to go to England. And she said to me, if there was work in Antigua, I would have stayed. So that always stuck with me. She took the 10-day boat ride like her older sisters to England, and she got a job sewing in a factory that her sister had worked in. And she said she was treated well enough there, but it was too cold and foggy, and she didn't like it. So, and one day she got caught in a fog, and she said she prayed to God and said, if you get me out of this fog, I'm going to leave this country. And that's what she did. And this piece is called London Fog.
Yeah.
So once out of the fog, she sailed to Antigua, and she found employment and started to send money home. This painting from the original series is called Broken Things, and these are some of the things that we broke after she brought them home from her employers. She worked at a home on Long Island and lived with her aunt in Brooklyn on the weekends. And other sisters came after her and repeated the same pattern. And she worked like this until someone introduced her to my father. And my father, he was, he may have been considered an uneducated laborer, but he managed, like many of his contemporaries, to buy several apartment buildings in Bed-Stuy and Prospect Heights. They cleaned houses and bought houses simultaneously. And it was interesting because my father, I learned recently that when he came to America, his grandfather had been living here, and he was staying with his grandfather. So his grandfather was already here for many years. And he said that, one day he came home and there was water on the bed. Somebody had put water on the bed, so that meant it was time to go.
Wow.
And that was in Harlem, and after that he moved to Brooklyn. So our elementary school, which is PS9, which is just a few blocks up Underhill Avenue, was across the street from our house, and my mother was well liked by my sister's teachers. So one day, my sister's teacher, who's in the audience, was pregnant. She was pregnant, and she asked my mother if she would watch the baby after she was born because she had to work. She needed to work. So my mother, being industrious and always wanting to make money, she said yes. And Miss Blackman, otherwise known as Miss Goldman, she said to me that it was really unheard of for women to go back to work so soon after they had babies. So it was really important to her that, it was really, actually she also said that my mother went to visit her in the hospital, which I didn't know, so it was, I'm not gonna cry, okay. So she said that she remembered looking out of the window at school and knowing that her child was safe over there with my mother.
Wow.
So since I was too young for kindergarten, I was at home for the first year of this, and this is a memory that has always stayed with me. My mother would say, "Let's get cracking." Every morning she said, "Let's get cracking." Okay, so my mother was a friend. This is like a very strong memory for me, standing in the hallway while they talked about grown-up stuff that I wasn't supposed to hear. And I did get shooed away a lot, which was not a great feeling. But, speaking with them again later, she said to me that my mother was like a goddess your mother was like a goddess to me. I was divorced, I didn't know anything about babies, and she told me what to do.
Wow.
But I could see that they were really friends. Even at that age, I could tell that. And we went to summer home in Woodstock most years, birthday parties, etc. They were our elementary school teachers we were in an open classroom at PS9, which I guess it was an experimental thing back then where we just learned so much, and it wasn't as regimented probably as it is now.
Right.
And they were just really also very wonderful teachers and people. I'm not gonna cry. Okay. Here are some more of those pictures. These are more recent pictures, as you can see. When my mother was living and she was came to visit in New York, they came up to see her. Oh, you're both right there.
Yes.
And some of these are actually just from like a month ago or so, and some of the daughters came to an exhibit that I had recently, so it's wonderful to still be in touch.
Right.
But when I was 5 years old, it was confusing. I probably didn't realize that my mother was getting paid for this because it seemed like, they were just friends. And then after school, they would come and they would still hang out. But, in contrast, my cousin, which is Aunt Catherine in the book, she also took care of other people's children, working as a live-in nanny on Long Island. But, the conversations she had with my mother were a little darker. And I heard some not so nice things that happened, in references to my lady, that she would talk about. And I could also tell that she was tired by the time she came on Friday. She was just like always pretty spent. And she had a very large presence in my young imagination. I thought of her as just this beautiful woman, just like very worldly or whatever. But you know, she's always stuck with me, this cousin, who I'm still in touch with. We had a few other relatives who also lived with us while they worked to get their citizenship. So, you know, obviously my original nanny series is sort of a tribute to them as well. And this spread, I imagine some of the things she did during the week, and all of these pieces are based on the original nanny series that I showed earlier. And my mother here, she was always constantly on the go, doing one thing or the other, whether it was for the immediate family, extended family, her church family, or her friends. Just busy, busy, busy. Always industrious in making and doing. She made many wedding dresses and cakes, favors, and other crafts. And this piece is called My Mother Was a Maker. And this one, My Mother Was a Baker. Another clear childhood memory, because my mother made legendary pizza. Legendary, right? Legendary pizza. So I had to make sure that this was included in the book. And again, back to the nanny series, you know, I remembered my mother when making this piece, Maple Mother, and you know, I saw myself in her always working and making things despite the children hanging around, you know. You know, I remember people always used to say, oh, you have 3 kids and you're making art or whatever. It's like, oh, how can you do it? Well, what am I supposed to do? You know, I need to make art. I got these kids, you know, we're going to make it work, you know. So in this spread, you know, Catherine calls her daughter long distance and says, if there was work, I would have stayed in Antigua. If there was work in Antigua, I would have stayed. And this is one of my favorite pieces. I like that I was able to show both places at once, you know, kind of bring them together. And, you know, to show how, you know, both girls are eating Twinkies, you know? Like, that's what happens, right? Again, I would have stayed. So this is a photo from a family reunion in Antigua, probably in the early 90s. I think most of my mother's brothers and sisters probably would have stayed in Antigua if there was work. But they were here and making the best of it. You know, here they worked hard. Regular jobs, side jobs, bought houses, educated their children, were active in their churches, had big holiday celebrations, took vacations, and were generally productive members of society. So these are some pictures of my family. This is my grandparents, actually, who never lived in America. And, you know, in the end there, they were at Uncle John's house, and my Aunt Eileen and my sisters. And I like that picture of the couch. You know, in the book I have like very detailed couch, because there was always, you know, so much, everything was so busy. All of the furniture, you know, with the plastic and everything, so, yeah. So this picture was an inspiration for My Mother Was a Sister. These are scenes that have always stayed with me. Actually, my cousin Alfred sent me a whole bunch of pictures one day. You know, this is even before the book. I'm not even sure why he sent me these pictures, but you know, once I started to imagine the book, I was like, oh, I have all these great photos. So that was the inspiration for this picture. My Mother Was a Sister. So yes, on Saturday mornings, I would accompany my mother to her job cleaning in the office, and you know, that was really our time together. You know, it was kind of a weird thing to do, but it was fun. You know, I had a lot of fun hanging out with her on Saturday mornings. I really look forward to it. You know, and it was a graphic design office, so I got so many discarded, you know, I guess they were art supplies. You know, I didn't know at the time that they were art supplies, but you know, it really got me interested in making things and crafting and things like this. And you know, I remember a stapler I got from there. I had that stapler for 20 years. You know, it was like I was like, why are they throwing these things away? They were still in the wrapping. You know, it was really kind of weird, but I was happy to take that. You know, in retrospect, I'm grateful for that experience and all the experiences that I had. You know, they were more profound than I realized at the time. You know, so now I continue to be creative and work on many interesting projects. And here I'm showing the two other children's books I illustrated, Anna Carries Water and Bulululu's Hair, both written by Olive Sr. and published by Trader Books. And both stories are of self-empowerment for girls, which is important to me as well. So it had been a dream of mine to show my original paintings from these books at the Brooklyn Public Library. My library, even though I live in the Bronx now, it's still my library. You know, we basically grew up here because it really was the only place that we could go besides church. I mean, sometimes we sort of walked past the library, they didn't know. But, you know, they thought we were at the library. You know, there's a big park right over there too. So, you know, Mommy's, you may have noticed Mommy sewing in most of the pictures. The story says, Mommy had been making us Easter outfits all week long. She looked so beautiful and had the same pretty dress, and I had the same pretty dress as she did. I may be busy, Mommy said, but I always have time for you. And, you know, this story does have a lot of angst to it, I guess, and, you know, she's basically saying to go away on every single page, you know, but she definitely took care of us, and we did feel loved. You know, I felt loved, even though, you know, it wasn't like a TV kind of love, you know, like, it wasn't like Leave It to Beaver at all, but, you know, she was always making us something, and we did have many outfits made out of the same fabric. It was funny because I was telling one of my friends about how, you know, she really did shoo us away a lot. You know, it was really like, you know, go and find something to do over there, you know. But my friend was just so like, she was like, yeah, my mother did that too. You know, it's like everybody, you know, that happens to everybody. So I didn't feel so bad after that, you know. And after I sent the book to one of my friends, and well, the manuscript, I guess. And she just sent me this picture of her aunts, all dressed in the same, you know, the same pattern that their mother had made for Easter. You know, she's a friend from Montana, you know, and so, you know, it's not just Antiguans who make dresses for their kids. So we really do have more in common than we think we do. And this piece from the original series, Grandmother, you know, this is really, you know, one of those commonality pieces, I guess. I saw a statuette when I was in Puerto Rico, and it was this very dark woman with like 7 very dark girls all around her. But it occurred to me that in the Caribbean, there's every race of people in the Caribbean. And so I wanted to show that in this painting. I think that's one of the things that make the Caribbean so special, actually. And here, this is just a picture of family after my mother's funeral. Just a little tiny part of the family, but I love this picture, and I just wanted to show my beautiful family. I mean, do you notice people? You recognize anybody over there? So, in closing, I would just like to read this review. This is actually the first review that I got for Nanny, and it was just so beautifully written. So I'm going to read it to you. It's very short. Okay, it's by Summer Edward, who is herself a Trinidadian, I believe. And she says, Afro-Antiguan American self-taught artist Laura James shares her childhood experience of growing up in Brooklyn with a mother who was a homemaker, domestic worker, and nanny. James's first-person narrative debunks harmful stereotypes of Caribbean nannies as tough, lazy, or difficult. Although James's mother often took a no-nonsense approach to parenting and was too time-strapped to spend as much time with her 3 daughters as she would have liked, James humanizes her as a woman of many talents, a reliable neighbor, a caring friend, and devoted mummy who juggled a demanding set of priorities and gave everything she had for the sake of her children. Complete with warm acrylic illustrations in James's signature style, this picture book is an unvarnished but compassionate tribute to the complexity of motherhood. thank you for listening. And I'm very proud, so proud and honored that I could write this book as a story about my mother, but also, my Caribbean heritage. And it's a story that so many people can identify with. So this was for Eileen Leona Marcella James, otherwise known as Aunt Catherine, Nana, Mrs. James, Sister James, Cat, and Mummy. And I didn't cry.
Thank you so much, Laura. And a big, big round of applause to Sharon Gordon.
Can I say something about Miss Lou?
Absolutely. I'm going to pass the mic to Sharon.
Okay, just to explain why you're dressed like that.
You can just get him to the stage so we can see you.
So I'm dressed like this because I'm channeling Miss Louise Bennett Coverley, who was my mentor. And she's known as Jamaica's first, well, people say first lady of comedy, but it's really comedy and culture. And she was a mentor to me. I spent many Saturdays with her learning about the connection between, Laura just said in the Caribbean, you find all races, it is true. The motto of Jamaica, I'm from Jamaica, but I claim Antigua and Trinidad and all of it. But Miss Lou taught us that Jamaica's motto is out of many one people. And what Miss Lou taught us was to be proud of that patois that we speak, that tongue, to be proud of hard work, to be proud of the songs that were work songs that we made into folk songs to get us through the work and get us through the day. To be proud of the stories of Brother Nancy and the connection between Ghana and Jamaica, and that these stories were stories the way you had the Hans fairy tales and what have you. Brother Nancy was our champion then, right? Who got in trouble and taught us how to live and what life lessons and values. And so that's what she was to a lot of young people. And at the time that I was a youth in Jamaica, that's who was really championing the culture and pouring into the young people. And then when I came to America, my mother was a nanny too, right? And this is my library too, and Brooklyn is home for me as well. And so it was the memories of Miss Lou and all that she taught me that would carry me through those lonely days. And I would just tell stories to my friends about Jamaica, and I would just act out the stories and the songs that Miss Lou taught me. And before you knew it, I was channeling Miss Lou, and I've become Miss Lou. And in my life, this is one of the things that I do, and I thank her every day because of her now I get paid and I get seen as Miss Lou to tell stories and dance and carry on. And so I thank you because this is what culture and heritage does. So thanks to my dear friend Laura. What I'm wearing is called the Jamaican bandana. And this is the national outfit for when we dress up and go out. We look bananas, that means we look nice, right? And so whenever you see me, I will be dressed like this. And thank you all, and please go get this book for all your children and grandchildren. It's a good Kwanzaa Christmas gift, and go see the exhibition. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And we have a few moments for, I was seeing everyone smile, so lovely. We have a few moments for question and answer, or a couple comments if you want. So if you have something you want to ask or say, please raise your hand and I'll come bring this microphone to you.
2 questions, sorry. But what's the most important lesson you learned from your mother? And why didn't you include your sisters throughout the book? It was good to see them at the end, but I was curious as to why it was more focused on you as opposed to including all your sisters.
Well, okay, what did I learn from my mother? I realized that I also do a lot of things in my life right now, and some people are like, oh, why do you do so much? Or don't do that because it's too much. But I can do a lot because that's how we grew up. We just naturally did a lot of things, and it wasn't a big deal. You make a list and you check it off, So my mother had lots of lists, So that's one thing that I recognized that I probably got that from her. It just kind of occurred to me. And why didn't I include my sisters? Well, there's not that many words, on each page. There's just so much. And actually, I really have 9 sisters. So a lot of them are not in the book. So it was just a concrete space, I guess.
Okay.
Did anybody else want to? Oh,
Pass
can you
it,
pass that
Austin.
down, please? Thank you.
Hi, Laura. This is just observation based on what you were saying about your mom shooing you away. That what I really took from this talk was how important privacy is to all of us, and having private space to think, which is so hard when you're a domestic worker or a laborer of any kind. But just in the way that you condensed her words and chose the sentences and celebrated the environments with color and pattern, it brought that across to me that somehow she's creating some private space for her own thinking and relationships that she's passing down to you.
That's a very good observation, thank you. And I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yes, coming right to you.
Well, there was a lot of things I loved about the book, but one of the things that stood out to me the most, when we think about rhythms like the rain and the waves hitting the shore, these are the things that we listen to when we want to be comforted. There's a lot of comfort that comes from rhythm, and I especially loved the way the repetition of my mother was a nanny, my mother was a friend, my mother was a good listener. And to me, it seems almost just like a big hug through the whole thing, just the rhythm of the word.
Hey, Laura.
It's a wonderful presentation. I'm curious to know how your children have responded to this book and the series in general. What are they saying to you?
Well, I think that we actually haven't spoken too much about it because, it's their life too, so maybe it doesn't seem so special to them. They would have been here last week, but they weren't able to come this week. But they're proud of me as well, and I know that, they've told me so that's beautiful. But, they definitely, it's just their story as well, to see themselves in these pictures where they're running around. And, I live in a closet. They used to, it was a very small apartment. That's why I said a closet. But they remember the apartment too, so it's just really their story as well. And they're proud to see that, and they're proud of me. So that's beautiful.
Hello, my name is Christine. I'm from St. Lucia, and I identified with the book. I like the way you have your mother as like a super lady, and the way you have her like every day of the week she was doing something else.
Yeah.
I know some people that are nannies, but basically the idea I had with a nanny was like taking the children, go to the park, play dates and so on.
Right.
But I enjoy the way you did the book and how you portrayed your mother. My mother, she was not a nanny, but she lived to be 105.
Wow.
And I treasure her life and how I grew up. I grew up here. I spent more of my life here than I did in St. Lucia. But I can identify with a lot of what you have in your book. And congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, and then we're gonna invite you all to our grand lobby to our web lobby.
Hello. I remember when you first started this series, I couldn't help but think of The Bluest Eye. And which was darker, obviously, but why a children's book and not more of a adult type of?
Well, I never imagined doing this at all until the publisher asked. I had no idea about doing a children's book, and I remember when they said, they wanted me to write the book as well, and I said, oh, you think I can write a book? And they were like, yes, we do, so it wasn't anything I had planned, and it would be wonderful to someday have a book with nanny images from the original series, perhaps, but, this publisher as well, they publish sort of like, they publish books about funerals and, single parents and just like things that you don't really see, you know, it's not like, they're not light topics, let's say. So they were happy to sort of try to tackle the topic of domestic work and nannies and what have you. So, yeah, it's a children's book for sure, but I feel like adults could resonate with it too, you know?
So glad I could be here. This is
Good to
great.
see you.
I guess I'm curious to know how old you were when your mother passed away, and whether you were more of a young adult or an adult, and how the relationship with your mother changed.
Good question. Well, you know, this is a true story, right? But I did not have a great relationship with my mother because my mother she passed away about 5 years ago. So I was, you know, well into my 40s. But my father, all our lives, basically, he was building a house in Antigua. So he's like, oh, I'm going back to sunny Antigua, going back to sunny Antigua. And then when I was 17 and my sister who lived in the house was 19, they went. You know, he went first, and he, you know, because he wanted to go, you know, so he went and he was going and he went. And then he told my mother, who didn't really want to go at that time because her whole entire family was in Brooklyn, you know, he's like, well, you got to come because I'm here and you have to come. So she went as well when I was 17, and they kind of left us in the house, you know. It was their house and we didn't have to pay rent, so that was nice, you know. And I was able to start painting and just to sort of, I was lucky, I suppose, that I could just do something creative and I didn't have to worry about, you know, making a living, let's say. And so I'm happy for that. And we were also happy to see them go. When I was 17 and she was 19, we thought that was the best thing ever, you know. But my kid, the youngest one, moved out when she was 25, you know, and that seems a little more reasonable because, you know, I wouldn't leave a 17-year-old, you know, I wouldn't do that. And so, you know, I didn't really speak with them much because they weren't in the country, you know. And then, unfortunately, my mother had a stroke, like, for the last 10 years of her life or so. And so she didn't really, you know, she couldn't really talk. So I couldn't talk to her, you know, only when I was in Antigua, I could see her. So it was not really a great relationship, it's, you know. And so, you know, when they were talking about writing a book about my mother, I was like, oh, what kind of book is that going to be? I actually have a painting that I did with my mother, and it's called The Red Bat, because my mother had a red bat. And, you know, she threatened us with the bat more than she actually used the bat, but it was still a red bat, you know, and the painting is not that nice. And, you know, but it's life, and it's a story, you know. I also remember one of these lovely teachers said to me, you know, she was sort of apologetic, you know, for taking my mother's time, you know, but I said, you know, this was something that I could use as, you know, as material for my paintings, and it's just the way it was. It's life. That's what happens, you know. And so I was able to see the bigger picture, you know. And you know, they had their lives. My parents did, you know. And I actually didn't even know half of what I know about them now. That, you know, when I was 17, I had no idea, you know. So you know, being a sharecropper at 13, that couldn't be so easy, you know. And just the idea that he just really wanted to go back to Antigua so badly, you know, he built himself a huge house, and, you know, he made it, let's say, you know, and he was very well respected there as well, you know, everybody loved Mr. James, you know, so that was his life, you know, so there are layers. But this is a children's book, so we're not going to talk about all that.
That's why we're here, and this is an adult program. We get to hear all the juicy backstory. Okay, this is our last question.
It really is, it's more of a statement than a question. The gentleman was asking you about, or was it the lady? I think it was the lady over there talking about how you did all you did. So my memory of Laura in her early days painting is just as you see her mom there. Zuri would be attached to one leg, right? Mem was somewhere probably close by with flour probably or something. And poor Neville was, so the children were always there. But Laura was always painting and doing what she had to do. And I, as the mother of a single child at the time, you know, we were young friends and young mothers, but I used to just admire the way Laura was able to get it done and she always got it done. And I think mom is the reason, because she saw it happening. And you would have to have known Laura, right, Alfred, during those days to see how she did it. I mean, how did she do it? I don't know, but her cousin is here and others who know her and can tell you that she did it. And we're here today to see Laura James because she didn't make having her children be an excuse for not doing what it is she wanted to do. For Laura, it was just a part of the happening, and she was gonna get it done. So I say, congrats to you, my dear sister friend. God bless you.
I want to thank you all so much. I feel like now we're kind of like a family. Thank you, Laura, for extending your family to the library. I also just want to say one small thing about why I felt it was so deeply important and impactful to bring this work to Brooklyn Public Library, to Central Library. And that is because every day in our youth wing, we see nannies taking care of the children, right? And it is so important for those women to feel themselves reflected and seen and made visible, and the importance and the if we haven't learned anything from the pandemic, may we take away this one lesson of who is taking care, right? Who is taking care, and the importance of taking care of each other. That's really the way that society, in my view, functions, and so much of this women's labor goes unseen and undervalued chronically. So to celebrate your mother, to celebrate your own creativity and the act of motherhood in its multiplicity is really so important for all of us. And the other thing I'll say is that, you know, one of the other programs that BPL Presents, my arts and culture team that I'm a part of, does is a Nanny's Fairy Tale Workshop. And if you all are around on January 20th, this is a cohort of writers, authors, who are nannies, who come and who are able to express themselves creatively. It's a writing workshop led by an extraordinary educator, Fatwa Abbas. And you know, it's been going on, I think, for 6 years now. So they will have a reading on January 20th. You're all invited. It's going to be a great celebration. Laura will be there as well. And I just want to wish you all a very healthy and happy New Year. We are in some, you know, challenging time, increasingly challenging times. So let's keep each other afloat. And thank you for giving us so much inspiration, Laura. Thank you.